Good evening, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, in conversation webinar between Pathfinder Chairman, Mr. Bernard Gunathilaka, and the Right Honorable Lord Michael Naseby. For those of you who have followed our discussions previously, you know the format. We will have Mr. Gunathilaka and Lord Naseby will engage in a conversation for about 30 to 40 minutes. And thereafter, we will take up any questions from the wider participants. We would like this session to be as interactive as possible. So please feel free to drop in any questions you have or comments on the chat box, but keep it as concise as possible so that we can take as many questions during the allocated 60-minute or so discussion. I will now hand over the discussion to Mr. Gunathilaka to begin the conversation.
Good evening, everybody. Greetings from the Pathfinder Foundation to all who are taking part in this program. I might as well start with a brief introduction of the Right Honorable Lord Naseby, PC, who was a former Conservative Member of the Parliament for Northampton South and the founder of the British Sri Lanka Parliamentary Group, now known as All Party Parliamentary Group on Sri Lanka. He is no stranger to us. His association with this island goes back to more than half a century. Currently, he is an active member of the House of Lords. Michael Wolfgang Lawrence Morris, as he was known then, first visited Sri Lanka in 1963 as a representative of a British firm to take charge of a company that needed expert attention. Since then, he kept his interest in Sri Lanka intact, supported our country unceasingly, and indeed fought hard to bring out the truth about what happened in Sri Lanka during the separatist conflict over the last several decades. What is important is the fact that he engaged in this task with the zeal of a missionary at personal cost and much sacrifice. Over the years, he visited the island dozens of times, met with heads of state and government, politicians, personal friends whom he had cultivated over the years, and others who could clarify what was going on in the country. He undertook this lifelong task voluntarily, which I would describe as labor of love, a burden he carries to date. In recognition of his service to the nation, he was presented with the highest award given to non-nationals, the Sri Lanka Ratna, or Jewel of Sri Lanka, by President of Sri Lanka in 2005. He took upon his shoulders to support Sri Lanka's case when there was a debate in the Foreign Commonwealth Office, whether to go ahead with the Victoria Dam project, the largest ever British development project in the early 1980s. And he was invited to attend the ceremony when the project was declared open by the late British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher. Similarly, he was very much there when the 2004 tsunami devastated the coastal areas of the country. More importantly, he carried out a relentless struggle with the institutions of Her Majesty's government to get the truth out as to what happened during the last phase of the separatist war that ended in May 2009. What is fascinating is the fact that he kept meticulous records of his association with Sri Lanka and interventions he made on behalf of our country over a period of 5 decades, which information he used quite deftly to weave a fascinating story of his experience with this island nation of ours. Recently, he published his memoirs entitled Sri Lanka Paradise Lost, Paradise Regained. This is the publication that came out recently, which is a veritable treasure trove of information. I hope that publishers would make some arrangements with a local bookstore to make available this important and very informative book, which describes how politics affecting Sri Lanka are being manipulated beyond our shores. I'm happy to say that arrangements have been made by Vijita Yapa Bookshop to import a consignment of this book. And if those who are interested, if they contact the Vijita Yapa Bookshop, they will be able to place an order for a copy of the book. I wonder what a contribution it would be if Sinhala and Tamil translations of the book are also published, which would benefit all those who are interested in our modern history, the separatist conflict, as well as international intrigue, as witnessed by much respected and a long-standing British politician who was not just a narrator, but an active participant of a drama that continued to unfold over several decades. With that brief introduction, I propose to commence our interview, which would last approximately 40 minutes, after which there will be an opportunity for the participants to pose questions if they wish to do so. Lord Naseby, thank you very much for joining the Pathfinder Foundation for this interview. We are very grateful to you for finding time to be with us this evening. Your book provides information how you came to Sri Lanka in 1963, representing a British commercial firm, and having lived in Sri Lanka for a while, you returned to the UK and finally went into politics, serving the House of Commons and later the House of Lords, which you are doing to date. Something Sri Lankans are not aware of was the role you played canvassing Prime Minister Thatcher to support the Victoria Dam project. That was sometime in 1982, which was a magnificent edifice of UK-Sri Lanka friendship at a cost of over 113 million sterling pounds, the biggest grant UK had given at that time to any country. You have claimed that UK establishment failed to be supportive of the project. What was the reason for this negativity at that time, I must ask, which seems to continue to date, apparently for different reasons. This was despite the Sri Lanka's stance over the Falkland issue at the UNGA in 1982, which resolution was won by Argentina overwhelmingly. However, Sri Lanka decided to vote with Britain on this resolution. Could you kindly share your comments on this particular matter, Lord Naseby?
I'm absolutely delighted to join the Pathfinder Foundation, with whom I have a great respect of, and thank you for the invitation. Yes, thinking back to those days, of course, it was the Labour government in the UK that had put forward the project, particularly Mr. Callaghan was the Prime Minister, and the minister responsible for it was a lady called Judith Hart, who I actually knew a bit because I took an interest in aid and I thought she was a good minister. Of course, the financial situation in the UK at the time that Mrs. Thatcher took over left something to be desired. It was quite clear that the budget was not in a balanced format and that some cuts had to be made somewhere. And unfortunately, one of the proposals, particularly because of the scale of the Victoria Dam, that was the one of a number that were lined up to be chopped. I decided that that was absolutely wrong. So I had a quick talk with Judith Hart to make sure it was all on track and was reassured that it was. I then asked to see the Foreign Secretary, Douglas Hurd, and explained my reasons why, in my view, it should go ahead. He listened carefully and said, well, I think it's actually for the Prime Minister to decide, and I'll make sure you get a chance to put your viewpoint. About 3 days later, I got a call from number 10. I went to see the Prime Minister. I put forward a presentation, just a short one. And fortunately, by profession, I am a marketing man, so I can make quite short presentations. And I said to her that this was probably the most worthwhile project anywhere in the world. Plus, it was absolutely vital to the future of Sri Lanka, both in terms of irrigation and power. Also, finally, that on Douglas Hurd's request, I had originally spoken to JR about support for the UK over the Falklands. Well, cut a long story short, and it wasn't a long story really, because Margaret said, I need 48 hours and I will come back to you, Michael. She came back to me in 48 hours and said, yes, you've convinced me, it can go ahead. And the other final interesting thing that was done was that somebody, and I think it was probably Balfour Beatty, had proposed that maybe Her Royal Highness Princess Anne should open the dam. But I suggested, I seem to remember, to Balfour Beatty that bearing in mind what Margaret had done, it would be more appropriate if Margaret was to open it.
Thank you very much indeed, Lord Naseby, for that explanation going back to almost 40 years. My second question is something relating to chapter 10 of your book, Despondency All Round. You have highlighted lack of understanding for Sri Lanka's plight shown generally by the West. What was the reason for this attitude, if I may ask, even after the LTT killed the former Indian Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi, President Premadasa, Foreign Minister Kadiragama, nearly killed President Kumaratunga, and many other members of the cabinet. These were in addition to massacres of civilians, too numerous to enumerate here. What was the reason behind this lack of understanding on the part of the West, if I may ask?
Well, I still don't really know the answer to that question, other than to observe one point. Mr. Bellasingham, the number 2 in the Tiger movement, opened an office in Camden in the inner part of London. Now, why the authorities in the UK allowed him to open an office when he was the chief schemer, etc., for the Tamil Tigers is beyond me. But I don't believe that anybody made any representations against him opening this office. I did not realize at that point the importance he had. And I don't believe, and I may be wrong, I don't believe the Sri Lankan government made any representations. If they did, I've no record of them, so I have to tread carefully there. But of course, at that point, we had hundreds of Tamil Tigers who had escaped or wanted to get to the UK. They had settled in certain parts of London. I'm quite sure they met up with Mr. Bellasingham, or he met up with them, and there was a continual lobbying from them without anybody else, other than perhaps the all-party Sri Lanka group, putting a different point of view. And it is interesting, you know, that the USA proscribed the LTTE 4 years ahead of the UK. Now, all of us should have picked that up. We should have, all of us, frankly, recognized that once the US prescribed them, we should have put considerable pressure onto the UK government straight away. But for reasons that are not quite clear to me in the early stages, we didn't. I certainly put pressure on after a couple of years, and we got somewhere in the end. But there was that gap, and I don't know, maybe history will explain to us what it was, but I think the root cause is Mr. Bellasingham.
Lord Naseby, I'm really puzzled by what you said. To believe that the Sri Lankan government failed to make representations about this matter. Honestly speaking, I cannot tell you very clearly whether I have information with regard to the kind of representations we made. But my understanding is over a period of time, we did make representations. Whether those representations fell into deaf ears, I do not know. To move on to the next question, that is with regard to your interaction with Lieutenant Colonel Gash, the British Defence Attaché based in Colombo. It was really a fascinating story. You have given an account of his impression of the performance of the Sri Lanka Army and the desire of the government to protect innocent civilians, which he had reported in positive light, according to what you say. However, the UK government had decided to ignore his first-hand reporting. You also say that the UK authorities took over 2 long years to release his reports to you, which they did after a protracted struggle. I think you had to fight very hard. First with the defense establishment, following that with the foreign ministry. So you have taken the position that his reports would have been seen by the UK authorities and later by the United Nations. And you have claimed this totally undermined the integrity of both the UN and the UK government in the period between 1st January and 16th May 2009. Then you say, my personal view is that there should be personal amnesty across all sides. Was it due to the fact Lieutenant Colonel Gash's reporting was inconvenient to the public position taken by the British government, why they were reluctant to make it available? Or on the other hand, as for your suggestion for amnesty across all sides, is it not effective to close the chapter and look at the future rather than seeking accountability endlessly? Do you have anything to comment on this, Lord Naseby?
Well, we'll come back to the amnesty in a minute. We have a procedure in the UK, and I think you have it the same similar in Sri Lanka, called the Freedom of Information Act. I wasn't quick enough, looking back, because I met Colonel Gash in January 2009 at the Hilton Hotel, and we had a good open discussion. He explained to me that some of the Tamils were coming over in the night time, some in the daylight, and that they were being properly looked after. I didn't really think to myself at that point, which I should have done, I fully admit now. As soon as I got back, or certainly after May the 18th, I should have immediately slapped in a freedom of information request to have those dispatches published, but I didn't. So a little later on, I did, and there is a procedure. You have to apply to the relevant ministry, which is the FCO, the Foreign and Commonwealth Office. So I did that. They take their time to answer. The first round was no. You then have to give some reasons. I did that. And I explained that at that point, there were not far off 500,000 Sri Lankans in the UK. So they were living in our country and they had every right to see these dispatches. Well, more appeals, and then I had to appeal to an independent panel in the FCO. Well, they turned it down as well. Then, thankfully, and this is the value of Parliament meeting, I spoke to a colleague who is a lawyer, and he said, you should try the Information Commissioner, Michael. So I duly find out about the Information Commissioner, and I put a proposition to him. And he then says, I think you have a point, Lord Naseby. Leave it with me. So it took him a couple of months more. And in the end, just before Christmas, I got a whole wad of the dispatches, heavily redacted.
Of course, yes.
I then looked at the dates, and I found there was nothing for the last three or four, about 2.5 weeks. So I thought, well, he must have sent something. He didn't go on holiday. So I then said to the Information Commissioner, hey, hold on a minute, we should be missing some. And another 4 arrived a few days later. But because of the heavy weight of the redaction, I said to him, is there anything else I can do? He said, well, you can appeal, but you're on your own. And I said, oh, all right, then I'll have an appeal. So we had a tribunal, and one of your colleagues who is living in London, who is closely involved with your good selves, Amal Abawardner, came along to give me moral courage and to help me. We were up against a couple of QCs and the lady at the Foreign Office in charge of the South Asia division. We put our point of view. They said that basically this would undermine Britain's standing with those who'd given confidential information for the future. And therefore, in the interests of the country, no, they couldn't release any more. So that's where we were. Now there has been a development, not a good development, I say. A couple of weeks ago, or perhaps now 2 months ago, I get a letter from the Foreign FCO saying that, well, basically, there's no independent verification of what Colonel Gash saw. And that arose because I'd asked them, had they sent these dispatches to Geneva? They said they hadn't because no one had asked for them from Geneva. I wrote to Geneva and say, why didn't you ask for it? They never replied. So now we have a situation where the FCO are undermining what these dispatches are about. Now, Parliament reassembles in September, and I'm going to look very seriously at a further FCO in the light of this change of status of these dispatches, because they've apparently downgraded them. I don't see why the heavy redaction should remain. So we'll have another go. So that's where we are. And I can't do that until Parliament reassembles. Now, on the amnesty front, there's always two sides to this. Yes, let's move on. I think the problem for Sri Lanka is that it would be a bit like if no, I won't draw that analogy I was thinking about. Basically, you've got 500,000 Sri Lankans in the UK.
Yes.
I don't know how many you've got in the States. Probably got 1 million plus in Canada, and bearing other parts of the world as well. My personal view is that there does need to be an amnesty. I think it should be held by Sri Lanka. You've demonstrated to the world that you respect law. We had it recently over an issue between Parliament and the legal boys, and a decision was made and Parliament stood by it and the government stood by it. So you need to, in my judgment, it should be done internally and with obviously taking in consideration the interests of the Tamil community, the Muslim community, the Sinhalese community. But it's not and should never be done from outside because we've seen what happens with Dar Osman in that report, who we don't even know who they are. So that's my personal view. It's up to, I'm only there to give my personal view. It is for the Sri Lankan country as a whole to decide what is the better way forward.
Thank you very much indeed. I think there is another point that the reporting that Lieutenant Colonel Gash did, if he ever did that, during the last few weeks of the conflict, they were not made available to you. Well,
they were overlooked. They were overlooked on the first stage.
Okay, all right. Okay, we can move on to another important question. That is that refers to the suspension of GSP, Lord Naseby, GSP plus really, facility granted to Sri Lanka by the EU. Mere 9 months after the end of the separatist war, they decided to suspend it. That was after the West's decision to convene a special session of the Human Rights Council, mere 10 days after the end of the conflict. Referring to this decision, you have said, sadly, the Minister of State, Gareth Thomas, MP, wrote to me on 18th February 2010, stating that the UK was fully supportive of Europe's action. Now, in your opinion, Lord Naseby, was the decision related to the loss of face due to the failed mission of Ministers David Miliband and Bernard Kouchner in late April 2009, losing the HRC resolution against Sri Lanka in May 2009, a result of electoral compulsions, or combination of all these three factors? I thought British stance should have been somewhat different from the other Europeans due to our Commonwealth relationship. What happened later was the UK, along with France and the USA, abstained when Sri Lanka applied for an IMF facility amounting to US dollars 2.5 billion to meet the needs of the displaced population, clear landmines, resettle civilians, and engage in reconstruction. Now, if I may ask, how do you see or how do you interpret such action by the West?
Well, you put your finger on it that there was the mixture of all three. You've got to remember, though, that the Minister of State, Gareth Thomas, does have a significant Tamil population in his own constituency.
Right. Yes.
And certainly in my dealings with him, he made that quite clear, that he was being heavily lobbied, that he believed what he was told, and it was almost irrefutable. And I and my colleagues in the all-party group tried to get him to think again, but we failed. I suppose I could argue that we did put quite a lot of pressure on the whole of Miliband's and the others, that Sri Lanka had to be helped one way or the other. I suppose their thought was, well, okay, we'll just abstain. And it did go through, I seem to remember. So that may have helped. But frankly, again, and this is something that's still happening in the UK, heavy lobbying by a section of the Tamil community in the UK against Sri Lanka.
Okay. We can move on to the next question. I am actually moving on to chapter 15, which has the title, Creating the Chance to Succeed. In this chapter, Lord Naseby, referring to the Human Rights Council Resolution 30/1 of 2015, you have highlighted an important legal point. That is, the conflict in Sri Lanka should come under IHL and not human rights law. You have correctly said what the government of Sri Lanka should have never accepted was violation of human rights law, which resolution Sri Lanka government co-sponsored and the administration that followed disowned it. While admitting that the new administration of 2015 may have erred due to political compulsions, it is rather surprising that throughout Sri Lanka seemed to have ignored this legal factor. Do you have any comment on the matter with the insight you have, having dealt with both governments?
Well, I have to say I was surprised that when the government changed from the Rajapaksa government to the next government, that for some reason, Sir Desmond de Silva, who was, as you may recall, very involved in Northern Ireland, had given a clear ruling that there should be under IHL, that he was not consulted or used or brought to the forefront. You had the Paragama report, which he was a party to, and I think it was a lost opportunity, frankly. And sadly, as we know, it's now the late Sir Desmond de Silva. He said, very, very sadly, a great loss to your country, because he was a great ally. I have to say, I did meet up with his deputy the other day here in London. And I think that you've got very good people here in London who are highly knowledgeable of IHT and Sri Lanka's position in it. And I would have thought at some point the government should be consulting them as well. But that decision's not for me to make, but I make it as an observation. I suppose the other observation one has to make is, though, that, and I don't know exactly what happened, but initially, Sri Lanka decided to support and it was Mangala who was the actual agent of doing it, the violations of human rights law. And that resolution, Sri Lanka co-sponsored. Well, personally, in my view, that was an error. But, you know, I'm not here to challenge it now. I think it was an error to co-sponsor it. And perhaps even worse, having co-sponsored it, to pull out at a certain point in time. I understand why people pull out, because it didn't represent the view, as I understand it, of the Sri Lankan government. So that muddied the water still more. And indeed, the water is still quite muddy.
Well, I can remember going back to 1987, we had a resolution in the Human Rights Commission at that time. And Sri Lanka fought against that resolution and eventually agreed to go along with it after obtaining or getting the consent of the other side to have certain deletions to certain paragraphs, so on and so forth, what we normally do in the commission. And eventually we allowed the resolution to be adopted without a vote, but we did not decide to co-sponsor that resolution, which is not what happened in 2015, unfortunately. Yeah. So later we had to go and withdraw our co-sponsorship, which was another new development. But we could have allowed that resolution to go through without co-sponsor it, which we had done in 1987. Anyway, let me move on to the next question, Lord Naseby, which relates to the allegation relating to genocide. Yeah. You would recall that recently in Canada there was a resolution adopted on this particular subject against Sri Lanka. Despite various figures touted by different entities that 40,000 to 147,000 deaths had occurred, you cite Dr. Shanmugaraja, a senior medical officer, who was working closely with the LTT Operations Center at that time, who had given the death rate up to May 14, 2009 as 2,500. In fact, Amnesty International too found graves numbering that many. Now, the question is, how could this low estimate of deaths stand against the high death rate stated by the United Nations and some Western countries? Do you think that was a deliberate inflation of casualties for an ulterior or with an ulterior motive?
They don't want to hear the truth. You've got again Tamil lobbyists, Tamil Tiger lobbyists, confirming in their view, they say they were witnesses, deaths of the scale that you've just quoted, 40,000 up to 140,000. I've done as much as digging or more digging than I think anybody else. And I've got the evidence from many sources. The census is a very important one, which I don't think, in all fairness, Sri Lanka has used properly yet. Because the census was taken obviously after the event, and that census must reflect, particularly given all the enumerators are Tamil people. It's not as if somebody shipped in somebody from the south of the island.
Exactly. Yes.
These are Tamil enumerators, properly done, properly verified, and they come up with a figure of somewhere between 5,000 and 7,000. In addition to that, we know from the comments from the US ambassador on the ground, from Colonel Gash that we've talked about. We know from others, and I've done a list of them in the past. So we've really got to keep hammering away. That is the only answer. And get people to recognize that these are facts. These are not facts hidden for the next 30 years. These are facts on the table. Now, of course, the minister will say to me, well, of course, there were some killed. Yes, I realize that, yes. And we don't really know, do we, Michael, exactly how many? No, I don't know the exact number, but no, it's nowhere near the numbers that are talked about. And we'll just keep hammering away. But you, the people of Sri Lanka, in your government, has to keep hammering away. I'm an ex-advertising man. And if you produce an advertisement once, not many people see it. If you produce it 10 times, maybe 10% will see it. You have to keep hammering away. That is the only way the great brands that we will buy, like Coca-Cola, etc., dominate their markets. You have to keep hammering away in every way possible using the published evidence.
True, quite true. Thank you very much indeed. Now, let me move on to the next question, Lord Ness. You described the meeting you had with Prime Minister Cameron in the company of two Sri Lankans, Amalabe Mardana and John Rajan York, representing Conservative Friends of Sri Lanka in November 2013, where he demonstrated lack of judgment, you say. You speak of his visit to Sri Lanka later in the month to attend the Chogam and his conduct in Sri Lanka and chastising the government for not providing adequate housing for the refugees without realizing the ground realities. But you say, but never offering a penny for the cause he was championing. Whereas our neighbor India had done exactly the opposite. In your opinion, was Prime Minister Cameron's conduct in Sri Lanka a put-up act or a put-up job to please the Tamil voters at home, or simply a demonstration of his ignorance of the heavy burden the government had to shoulder since 2009 to 2013?
I don't really know the answer, but I found him as a person very superficial in most things he looked at. I never think he thinks strategically, nothing to do with Sri Lanka. We talk about Brexit or Scottish independence. I thought his handling of both was poor. I think he just, I don't think it was a put-up act. I think he'd, yes, been got at, but I don't even think that was the dominant thing. I just don't think he was really interested and hadn't thought it through at all. And yes, he got my gullet when he went up to Jaffna, saw the homeless people, but didn't offer a penny, particularly as he must have known and been briefed that India was helping. So yes, I remain highly critical of that visit that he made, and frankly, he might as well have stayed at home.
Thank you. Now, my last question, time is running out fast. I go to chapter 19, reflections. I think the final chapter of your book is unique in many ways. It speaks of many developments. President Mahinda Rajapaksa's realization that separatism should be brought to an end one way or the other. The barrage of criticism against the country following the fall of LTT, your persistent claim that IHL should govern the conflict and not human rights, the 3-member UN Commission gathering evidence with the promise of anonymity so that sources cannot be divulged for 30 long years, that there was no genocide as alleged, and the number of civilian deaths may have stood around 5,000 and not 40,000 or 100,000, as claimed by the United Nations and others, while the United Nations claimed that torture was prevalent. That accusation was repeatedly denied by the head of mission of ICRC in Colombo. You express frustration over the time Sri Lanka took to set up Missing Persons Commission, the slowness to revise PPA, and the need for creating a Truth and Reconciliation Commission. You also have expressed the view that reconciliation could happen only in a manner that all Sri Lankans living in Sri Lanka can buy into it, and not through a creation of the West with foreign judges. Now, throughout your work, you have highlighted the political influence wielded by the Tamil lobbyists and how they influenced representatives of both Labour and Conservative parties. Would you agree that Sri Lanka has failed to recognize the important role played by the Tamil diaspora and also failed to engage them? Do you have any recommendations to the government on this regard?
Yes, my views that I expressed in the book remain as they are there. We are trying, that is we in the UK, the all-party group is now trying quite hard to build up a relationship with the all-party Tamil group and the all-party Muslim group. So I think that potentially should begin to help. I suspect it's going to be quite a rocky road, but nevertheless, we've had a couple of meetings, and I know that the minister responsible is viewing it favourably. I think Sri Lanka should still do more itself. For instance, we have COP26 in November. Has Sri Lanka put in a submission, or is it going to put in a submission? I mean, you've got one of the world's leading universities at Peradeniya. I can't believe that there is not a unit there that must have thought about climate change. And I would recommend strongly that Sri Lanka puts in a submission. I mean, if Gabon can put in a submission, as they have already done, where are we? I would like Sri Lanka to be in the forefront of these sorts of initiatives. And I hope very much that it can be done. I personally have to try and find a door into the UNHRC, because at the moment I'm sending missives out and nothing's coming back, despite the fact that I've actually met the chairman there, who is a Chilean lady. So in my judgment, Sri Lanka has 3 challenges now. The missing persons one is absolutely crucial. And I know Gotabaya begun to put more effort behind that, but we need to get that job done so that we know that within a small percentage, how many people actually are missing, therefore presumed dead. And you can correlate that to the census that we talked about. Secondly, I think I don't really understand. Here we are at the bottom of South Asia, the key point of the trade routes. We don't seem to have too many friends in Sri Lanka, in South Asia. I think we have to build some friendships. I mean, I know Singapore quite well. I'm vice chairman of that group. They've built up friends. Under Lee Kuan Yew, they didn't have very many friends initially, I can tell you. But they have built up ties and things. Somehow Sri Lanka has to build up some support. Secondly, you have to play your cards. You are at the crossroads of the international trade. You would have not have won the war without China's support.
True.
The West doesn't want you to work closely with China. So there is a bargaining situation, and you've got to be adept at that bargaining. Now, in my experience, when I was a businessman in Sri Lanka, you are very good and very adept at bargaining. So I like to see a few of the commercial skills being put to effect on the political front. And I finish by saying to you and your good friends who are listening in now, you're a wonderful country. You've got a wonderful, talented people. When the London Stock Exchange runs on your software. And whereas Singapore was nothing when Lee Kuan Yew took over, it's now a major financial center in the world.
True.
There's absolutely no reason why Sri Lanka couldn't be similar to Singapore and with our own differences. So I just wish everybody all possible luck in this challenge, and I will do my best to try and help on the journey that we are doing together.
Thank you, Lord Naseby. I could continue with the sentiments expressed in this last chapter. Unfortunately, time does not permit me to do so. Your commitment to the cause of Sri Lanka is amply demonstrated by the sentiment expressed somewhere in the book, expressing the hope that someone from your family or any other interested party would unlock the evidence gathered by the UN Commission of Inquiry after the lapse of 30 years. We have 20 more years to go, and I certainly hope we will eventually be able to unearth the truth. We have another 20 within the next 20 years' time. It is time for us to provide an opportunity to those who wish to ask questions. Due to time constraints, we will have to limit the questions and answers to about 15 minutes. Amira, how are we going to proceed?
Let's try our best to take as many questions as we can. Lord Naseby, the first question posed to you is, Mahinda Rajapaksa set up the Lessons Learned and Reconciliation Commission and also the Paranagama Commission during 2010 to 2015. What is your opinion of these commissions? And should Sri Lanka now be re-looking at implementing some of the recommendations of these commissions?
I think they were right to be set up. My criticism or comment is that, yes, it does take time. It has to be done thoroughly, but it has to come to a conclusion. And we must now, in my judgment, particularly with Geneva hanging over us, bring them to a conclusion. So I hope that the government will be able to do that in the very near future.
Okay. Another question is, do you think Chinese influence in Sri Lanka is the key issue to have pressure exert on Sri Lanka by the West?
I didn't catch all that. Say it slowly.
Do you think Chinese influence in Sri Lanka is the key issue to have pressure exert on Sri Lanka by the West?
Oh, I don't know the answer to that. Sorry, I have no idea about that one.
Okay, so then let's go on to the next one. There are some parallels between the conflicts in Sri Lanka and UK's Northern Ireland. The British government now proposes to set up a truth commission to address the legacy of the Northern Ireland troubles, building on the amnesties to alleged terrorists that were granted when Tony Blair was Prime Minister, and now ensuring that British Army officials do not face prosecution for alleged state killings. As Prime Minister Boris Johnson has said, it is an attempt to draw a line on the past for the sake of future generations. Isn't it time that Sri Lanka sets up its own domestic mechanism, share experiences and working practices with UK and other countries such as South Africa and Colombia to establish a Truth and Reconciliation Commission for Sri Lanka?
In a word, yes. And I was a very, very junior minister in Northern Ireland during the Troubles. I saw the Troubles there on the ground. I even had a death threat for the second election in 1974 because I had an Irish cell of the IRA in my constituency. And yes, truth and reconciliation has to be the way forward. And my advice to Sri Lankan government is watch very closely what is happening by the British government at the moment in Northern Ireland. And you've got a very good High Commissioner in London. I'm sure she's doing it. She may need some further help to do that. I would suggest we possibly need someone on the ground over in Northern Ireland as opposed to just sitting in London. That's my off the top of my head thought. But we need to check there and try and work step by step along that so that nobody can say we've done it very differently from what the UK has done in Northern Ireland.
We have another long question. Excellency, regarding Colonel Gash's connection, we as Sri Lankans thank you for establishing the truth on civilian casualties, human rights or humanitarian law. Respecters do search for details like you did to ensure truth and justice. It requires investigations, inquiries, and court actions. In Sri Lanka, such actions equate to taking war heroes to the electric chair. While searching for data shared by Colonel Gash with the Foreign Office, you took the British Information Commission and the British Foreign Office to a first-tier tribunal, as you said. There, in your skeleton argument, you stated that you do not preclude proper investigations into some war crimes, such as the White Flag incident. There is a nationalist lobby here that thinks you are against taking war heroes to courts. Therefore, you are considered a savior. With the quoted statement in mind, if I say you support taking any war heroes to court, am I right?
I think he's right, or she. It's very difficult to follow all the machinations of that, but there's enough evidence that the armed forces of Sri Lanka behave properly. That I am certain about. Of course, in any situation, there may be instances where some particular element has not behaved properly. Maybe even a war crime, in which case, yes, that's what the Hague's for. But when I think, I'm an ex-RAF pilot. I had a son in the third Gulf, in the Gulf War in Kuwait. You do get at certain stages situations where things go wrong. They may be on the surface, seem to be a war crime, but upon investigation, it becomes something different. Cool. I mean, the White Flag, bearing in mind what happened to others who were assassinated, nothing to do with the war earlier, if I was a minister on the field of battle and some people came forward, I would think very carefully about meeting them, because the history of the LTTE is that the minute they get near enough, they blow you up. So these are difficult issues.
Okay, then we have a question. Says, I was particularly interested to hear you say that you have initiated joint discussions among APPG for Sri Lanka and APPG for Tamils as well, as APPG Cosmos. Could you elaborate a bit more on any emerging areas of synergy there?
Elaborate on any areas of?
Could you elaborate a bit more on any emerging areas of synergy?
Well, we've only had 2 meetings. I mean, that in itself was a triumph. But unfortunately, we've been in COVID. So this has had to be done on the telephone or by Zoom. And that's not the way to sort these things out. So I hope very much, and September's not that far off, that we can sit down and have a good discussion with them as to really what's behind their drive. Because the vast majority of Tamils in the UK are vital to the National Health Service, play a great role in our society. There's just a kernel there, core. I don't know the size of it. It's not two men and a dog. And I think the Muslim area, that's far less difficult. They were very upset by the decision of the government in Colombo about burying the dead in the early stages of COVID. I don't think they fully understood why that was necessary. Even I had a question on why was it necessary. Now, it came out about the level of the water. Well, I think perhaps someone should have anticipated that it's easier after the event, that would have been a problem. But it was a problem, it still hangs there, and we've got to overcome that.
All right. And I think our final question is, you said that the FCO has written to you saying that Colonel Gash's statements on Sri Lanka, hold on, it just moved. You said that the FCO has written to you saying that Colonel Gash's statements on Sri Lanka have not been independently verified. Can this letter be made public and copied to the Sri Lankan government?
Well, I've already copied it to them through the Foreign Office, Sri Lankan Foreign Office. In other words, through the High Commission. So they have a copy.
Okay. One final question. Let me just squeeze this in. In your opinion, why do some Western nations have anti-Sri Lankan attitudes, especially regarding the anti-terrorism operations?
I wish I knew the simple answer to that. There isn't a simple answer. You see, we've had now, well, where are we now? 09, we've 10 years or 11 years of propaganda. And people don't realize, I wonder how many people in Sri Lanka, none of us know what the war chest of the Tamil Tigers was. It's huge, that's all I know. Probably several billion, not million, billion pounds. That's a lot of money to encourage people to be difficult in life. And you see it in parts of Canada, you see it in parts of the UK, you see it in the States. There are people there who are using, that money is being used for what I would say is absolutely wrong causes and possibly illegal causes.
All right. Thank you, Lord Naseby. Mr. Gunathilaka?
Okay, thank you. Now, before I conclude, I have two things to say. One is wide publicity has been given to today's event in local newspapers. And today's Island has this one-page article written by senior media personnel, Mr. Shamindra Ferdinando. In that, he has made mention about the program today. I'm sure, my Lord Naseby, you are familiar with the name Shamindra Ferdinando. And he also says if Sri Lanka swiftly and decisively acted on the revelations made by Lord Naseby way back in October 2017, the country would have been able to expose the Geneva lies. Unfortunately, the previous government conveniently turned a blind eye to Lord Naseby's revelations that countered the very basis of the Geneva project. So he has written quite a lot about this particular subject. The second, I think, is again about this book which has been published, which will be available shortly in Sri Lanka, Vichita Yapa's book, a bookshop. Those who are interested, I can ask once again to please visit the bookshop, place an order, and you will be able to have your own copy of this very important publication put together by Lord Michael Naseby. Finally, expressing appreciation on behalf of those who seek truth and reconciliation among all communities. On behalf of the Pathfinder Foundation, please allow me to thank you, Lord Naseby, for finding time for this In Conversation program of the Pathfinder Foundation, and also to wish you long and healthy life to continue the lifelong work you have undertaken during your active political life, and particularly to continue your work for further improving the friendship or friendly relations between Sri Lanka and the United Kingdom. Before I conclude, I must also express my appreciation on behalf of the Pathfinder Foundation to Mr. Amal Abeyewardena, a long-time resident in the UK and friend of Lord Naseby, for acting as a bridge between Lord Naseby and the Pathfinder Foundation to facilitate this In Conversation program. Thank you very much indeed. And we appreciate very much the support you have given. And Lord Naseby, thank you very much once again for being with us this evening. Thank you.